Document, Part 6. The decision to reach out to Zix and Vral weighed heavily on Emily Parker. She knew the risks. Trusting aliens who had already warned humanity of impending doom wasn't a move most people would support. But as she looked at the chaos outside the research station, the glowing mutants pounding on the walls and swarms of insect-like creatures buzzing in the cold night air, she realized they had no other choice. Humanity was losing this fight, and the aliens might be their only hope. Ryan Cole stood beside her, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "We bring them here, and they turn on us." "They won't," Emily interrupted firmly, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the translator device. "They've tried to warn us from the start. They wanted to destroy us. They could have done it already." Daniel Ross chimed in, clutching a clipboard filled with notes. "She's right. Aliens aren't the enemy here, it's Viren. They know more about it than we do. Maybe they can help us stop it." Ryan didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Reluctantly, "All right, let's do it. But if things go sideways, don't blame me." Using the translator, Emily sent a message into the wilderness, broadcasting their plea for assistance. It took hours before they received a responses series of clicks and hums that translated roughly to "*We will come. Be ready." By dawn, Zix and Vral arrived at the research station, their sleek exoskeletons shimmering faintly in the pale morning light. They moved cautiously, their multifaceted eyes scanning the area for threats. Ryan and his soldiers kept their weapons, trained on the aliens. Though Emily had made it clear that firing without provocation was not an option, Zix stepped forward, its movements deliberate and calm. Through the translator it spoke. "You called?" "Why?" Emily stepped closer, holding up her hands to show she meant no harm. "We need your help. Viren is spreading faster than we can contain it. People are mutating, disappearing, dying. We don't know how to stop it." Vral tilted its head, emitting a series of soft clicks. "You ignored our warnings? Now the cycle progresses." "We know we made mistakes," Emily admitted, her voice tinged with desperation. "But we're trying to fix them. Please, if there's anything you can do to stop this, we'll do whatever it takes." For a long moment, the aliens were silent, their gaze unreadable. Then Zix clicked again, its tone softer. "There may be a way, but it requires sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Ryan demanded. Stepping forward protectively, Zix hesitated before answering. "Viren feeds on energy. To disrupt its cycle, we must neutralize its source. This means destroying all traces of it, including those infected." Hart sank. "You mean killing everyone who's been exposed?" "No," Zix replied. "Not killing, ending the cycle. Those consumed by Viren are no longer fully human. Their bodies serve as hosts for our young. To save your species, we must sever this connection." The room fell silent as the weight of Zix's words settled over them. Of the table, his knuckles white. "How many people are we talking about? Thousands? Millions?" "All who carry Viren within them," Vral confirmed solemnly. "The longer we wait, the more difficult it becomes." Ryan shook his head, his jaw clenched. "There has to be another way. We can't just give up on everyone who's been affected." "There isn't," Zix said bluntly. "Your survival depends on decisive action. Delay will only worsen the outcome." Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing. She wanted to argue to find some alternative solution, but deep down, she knew Zix was right. Every second they delayed gave Viren more time to spread, to transform innocent lives into vessels for alien larvae. The thought sickened her, but she couldn't deny the logic behind the aliens' proposal. "We'll need a plan," she said finally, her voice firm despite the turmoil inside her. "Something large-scale, something that can target Viren without harming unaffected areas." Zix nodded approvingly. "A disruption pulse. Strong electromagnetic waves can destabilize Viren's molecular structure, rendering it inert. However, creating such a pulse requires significant resources and precision." Daniel frowned, flipping through his notes. "Electromagnetic pulses. It sounds like something we'd need specialized equipment for." "And even then, wouldn't It affect electronics too. It will, Zix confirmed. But the trade-off is necessary. Your technology cannot coexist with Viren indefinitely. Ryan crossed his arms, his face grim. So what's the next step? Where do we start? The satellite dish, Emily said suddenly, snapping her fingers. There's an old communication array in Arizona decommissioned years ago, but still functional with the right modifications. If we can get there and activate it, we might be able to generate a pulse strong enough to cover a wide area. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Arizona. That's hundreds of miles away. How do you propose we get there with everything falling apart? Around us. Emily turned to him, her eyes blazing with determination. We'll make it work. We don't have a choice. Preparations began immediately. Ryan assembled a small team to accompany Emily and Daniel to Arizona. Jake Miller, seasoned soldier known for his resourcefulness. Sophia Kim, a tech expert capable of modifying the satellite dish. And 2 additional guards to ensure their safety. Supplies were packed hastily, including food, water, medical kits, and spare parts for the vehicle they planned to use. As they loaded up and prepared to leave, tensions ran high. The horde outside the station had grown larger, their eerie green glow visible even in daylight. Mutated humans pounded relentlessly on the walls, their guttural cries sending shivers down everyone's spines. Insects buzzed incessantly, forming clouds that blocked out patches of sky. This feels like walking into a nightmare, Jake muttered, checking his weapon one last time. You sure about this? No, Emily admitted honestly. But staying here isn't an option either. We have to try. Before leaving, Zix approached them, its clicking voice soft but urgent. When the pulse activates, retreat immediately. Its effects will be widespread. Emily nodded, grateful for the warning. Thank you for helping us. Zix didn't respond directly, but its gaze lingered on her for a moment before turning away. With a final glance at the chaos surrounding the station, the team climbed into their vehicle and sped off into the frozen wilderness. The journey to Arizona was anything but smooth. Roads were blocked by abandoned cars and debris, forcing them to take detours through treacherous terrain. Along the way, they encountered remnants of civilization towns overrun by glowing insects, buildings crumbling under the weight of neglect, and survivors huddled together in makeshift camps. Some begged for help, while others attacked, driven mad by hunger or exposure to Viren. One encounter nearly cost them dearly. As they passed through a narrow canyon, a swarm of insect-like creatures descended upon them, their wings creating a deafening roar. Jake and the guards fired wildly, trying to keep the swarm at bay while Sophia worked frantically to repair damaged tire. Emily and Daniel crouched low in the vehicle, shielding themselves from the onslaught. Hurry up. Ryan shouted over the chaos, emptying another clip into the swarm. I'm going as fast as I can. Sophia yelled back, her hands trembling as she tightened the last bolt. We're good to go. With the tire fixed, they sped off, leaving the swarm behind. Everyone sat in stunned silence, their nerves frayed, but their resolve unbroken. When they finally reached the satellite dish in Arizona, exhaustion weighed heavily on the team. The facility was dilapidated, its metal structures rusted and overgrown with weeds. Inside the control room, dust-covered consoles hinted at decades of disuse. Sophia got to work immediately, her fingers flying across keyboards as she brought the ancient system back online. It's worse than I thought, she said after a few minutes, frowning at the screen. Some of these components are completely fried. I'll need 2 jury rig replacements using spare parts. How long will that take? Ryan asked, pacing nervously. A few hours, maybe more, Sophia replied. But I can do it.
While.
Sophia worked, the rest of the team secured the perimeter. Mutated humans lurked nearby, drawn by the noise of their arrival. Jake and the guards set traps and reinforced the doors. Determined to hold off any attackers until the pulse could be activated, Emily wandered outside, staring up at the massive satellite dish looming above them. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. So much depended on this mission, succeeding not just their lives, but the future of humanity itself. Do you think we can pull this off? Daniel asked, joining her. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. Emily hesitated before answering. I don't know, but we have to try. If we fail, well, I don't want to think about that. Daniel nodded, his expression grim. Let's just hope luck is on our side. Hours later, Sophia let out a triumphant shout. It's ready. Hit the switch when you're ready. Ryan took position at the controls, his hand hovering over the activation lever. Emily joined him, her heart pounding in her chest. You sure about this? She asked softly. Ryan glanced at her, his face pale but resolute. No, but we've come too far to turn back now. With a deep breath, he pulled the lever. The satellite dish groaned to life, its panels rotating as it began emitting a low-frequency hum. A bright flash of light shot into the sky, followed by a ripple of energy that spread outward like a shockwave. The air was thick with humidity, and the jungle buzzed with life. Strange birds called out from the canopy above, their cries echoing through the dense foliage. John Carter wiped sweat from his brow as he pushed aside a thick vine blocking his path. Behind him, the rest of the team followed in single file, their boots crunching softly against the damp earth. This alien planet was unlike anything they had ever seen before. A wild, untamed world teeming with bizarre plants and creatures that seemed to defy logic. Emily Dawson adjusted the strap of her backpack as she walked, her eyes scanning the surroundings with fascination. She was a biologist by trade, and every step into this uncharted territory felt like stepping into a dream. The towering trees stretched high into the sky, their leaves shimmering faintly under the dim light filtering through the clouds. The ground beneath them was covered in moss-like vegetation that glowed faintly blue, giving off an eerie yet beautiful glow. Emily knelt briefly to examine one of the glowing patches, her gloved fingers brushing against it gently. It's incredible. She murmured to herself, though loud enough for Jake, the mission leader, to hear. Jake gave her a quick glance over his shoulder, but didn't stop moving. Focus, Emily, he said sharply. We're not here to admire the scenery. She straightened up and nodded. Falling back into line behind John, despite Jake's stern demeanor, she couldn't help but marvel at everything around her. Every plant, every insect, even the very air seemed alive with energy. It was overwhelming. Yes, but also exhilarating. For someone like Emily, who had spent years studying ecosystems on Earth, this place was like discovering a second Genesis. John, on the other hand, wasn't quite as captivated by the beauty of their surroundings. He was focused, his sharp gaze sweeping across the jungle ahead. A former soldier turned explorer, John had seen his fair share of dangerous environments, and something about this one set off warning bells in his mind. The silence between the calls of unfamiliar animals felt too deliberate, too calculated. It was as if the jungle itself was holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to make the first move. Keep your eyes open, John said quietly, his voice carrying just enough for the others to hear. Something doesn't feel right. Jake slowed his pace slightly, turning his head to look at John. You picking up on something specific, or is this just your usual paranoia talking? John shook his head. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but we should stay alert. The group continued forward, weaving through the labyrinth of vines and roots. The terrain grew increasingly difficult to navigate, forcing them to climb over fallen logs and duck under low-hanging branches. Despite the challenges, no one complained. They were professionals, each chosen for their skills and resilience. Still, the oppressive atmosphere of the jungle weighed heavily on all of them. Then, without warning, it happened. John froze mid-step, his body going rigid as his instincts screamed at him to react. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a flicker of movement, something large and shadowy darting between the trees. His hand instinctively went to the utility knife strapped to his belt. But before he could draw it, the creature revealed itself. It burst forth from the underbrush with terrifying speed, its massive form crashing through the vines like they were nothing more than cobwebs. Its skin was covered in dark, armored scales that reflected the faint light, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural green hue. Long, razor-sharp fangs jutted out from its mouth, glistening with saliva. The beast let out a guttural roar that sent chills down everyone's spines. "Get back," Jake shouted, raising his rifle. But it was too late. The creature lunged forward, closing the distance between itself and John in mere seconds. There was no time to dodge, no chance to fight back. The beast's jaws snapped shut around John's forearm, its teeth sinking deep into his flesh. Blood trickled down his sleeve, staining the fabric crimson. For a moment, there was only silence. The entire group stood frozen, staring in horror. At the scene unfolding before them, Emily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Jake's finger hovered over the trigger of his rifle, unsure whether firing would make things worse. And then, to everyone's astonishment, John started laughing at first. It was soft, almost hesitant, but quickly grew louder until it filled the clearing. The sound was so unexpected, so incongruous with the situation, that it took everyone a moment to process what was happening. John pulled his arm free from the beast's grip with surprising ease, leaving the creature momentarily stunned. He looked down at the wound, flexing his fingers experimentally, and chuckled again. "Well, that tickles," he said. Grinning despite the blood dripping from his arm, the beast recoiled, clearly unsettled by John's reaction. With one last growl, it turned and disappeared back into the jungle, leaving the group in stunned silence.
Ow.
No one moved or spoke for several long seconds. Finally, Emily broke the spell. "Are you okay?" she asked hesitantly, taking a cautious step toward John. He nodded, still smiling. "Yeah, I'm fine, just a scratch." Jake lowered his rifle, his expression a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. "A scratch? The thing bit you, John? You're bleeding?" "I know," John replied casually, examining the wound more closely. "But it doesn't hurt. Not even a little." Emily approached him cautiously, pulling a medkit from her pack. "Let me take a look at that," she said, her tone firm but gentle. "We need to clean it and make sure there's no venom."
Yes.
She worked, applying antiseptic to the puncture marks. John remained unusually calm. He didn't wince or flinch, not even when she pressed down on the wound to check for deeper damage. His nonchalance only added to the growing unease among the group. "This isn't normal," Jake muttered under his breath, pacing back and forth. "Nothing about this is normal." "No kidding," Chris chimed in, his voice trembling slightly. "The kind of animal bites someone and then runs away. And why aren't you screaming in agony, John?" John shrugged. "Beats me. Maybe it likes me." The comment earned nervous laughter from the group, though no one found it particularly funny. The encounter had left them all shaken, and the fact that John seemed completely unaffected only made things worse. Something about this situation felt wrong. "We should head back to camp," Jake decided finally, his tone brooking no argument. "Emily, keep an eye on him. If anything changes, if he starts feeling sick or acting weird, we need to know immediately." Emily nodded, packing up her supplies. "Understood." As they began the trek back, the mood among the group was somber. Now the jungle, once awe-inspiring, now felt menacing.
Ow.
Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made them jump. John, however, appeared unfazed. He walked at the front of the group, whistling softly to himself as if nothing had happened, unbeknownst to the others. He could still feel the phantom presence of the beast lingering in his mind. It wasn't fear or pain. It was something else. Entirely. Something primal, ancient, and powerful. And though he couldn't explain it, John knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The strange reaction back at the camp. Tension hung thick in the air. The team gathered around a small foldable table set up near their tents, makeshift lanterns casting flickering shadows on the ground. Emily worked quickly, laying out medical supplies while John sat on a stool, his bitten arm resting on the table. The wound didn't look as bad as it should have, just 2 deep puncture marks surrounded by faint bruising, but the lack of pain and swelling was unsettling. Jake paced nearby, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his brow furrowed with worry. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, for what felt like the 100th time. "That thing bit you hard enough to draw blood. There's no way there's no venom." John shrugged, leaning back slightly as Emily cleaned the wound again. "Maybe it wasn't poisonous. Or maybe I'm just lucky." Lucky. Jake stopped pacing and turned to face him. You don't get lucky when something like that attacks you. Something's going on here, and we need to figure it out. Emily glanced up from her work, her expression thoughtful. He's right, John. This isn't normal. Even if the creature didn't inject venom directly into your bloodstream, bites usually lead to infections or some kind of reaction. But this. She gestured toward his arm. It's almost like your body is ignoring the injury entirely. Well, good for my body then, John said with a smirk, though his tone carried a hint of unease. He hadn't told anyone about? The strange sensation still lingering in his mind, the faint hum of energy coursing through him ever since the attack. It wasn't painful. In fact, it felt oddly invigorating, like electricity sparking beneath his skin. But he knew mentioning it would only fuel Jake's paranoia. I want to run some tests, Emily announced, standing up and gathering a few vials and syringes. We need to analyze your blood and see if there's any trace of toxins or anything else unusual. John raised an eyebrow, but didn't protest. Knock yourself out. Just don't take too much. I might need it later. Emily rolled her eyes but smiled faintly, grateful for his attempt at humor. She carefully drew a sample of his blood, labeling the vial before placing it in a portable testing kit. While she worked, the rest of the team busied themselves with other tasks, though none of them seemed fully focused. Laura and Chris huddled together near the fire pit, whispering anxiously. Jake continued pacing, occasionally glancing toward the edge of the jungle where the trees loomed ominously as night fell. The temperature dropped sharply and the jungle came alive with unfamiliar sounds, chirps, growls, and rustling leaves, created an eerie symphony that kept everyone on edge. Emily retreated to her tent, setting up her equipment to begin analyzing John's blood. She worked methodically, her hands steady despite the gnawing feeling of unease growing in her stomach. Whatever had happened during the encounter, she knew it was far from ordinary. Hours passed, and the results began to trickle in. At first glance, everything appeared normal: red blood cell count, white blood cell activity, oxygen levels all within standard ranges. But as she dug deeper, something caught her attention. Certain markers in John's blood were elevated, far beyond what she'd expect even in someone recovering from trauma. And then there were anomalies she couldn't explain. Strange proteins and enzymes that didn't match anything in her database. Her heart raced as she cross-referenced the findings. Could it be possible? Had the venom somehow altered John's DNA? The idea seemed far-fetched, bordering on science fiction, but the evidence was undeniable. She double-checked her calculations, triple-checked the equipment, and finally sat back. Staring at the data in disbelief, outside, the wind picked up, sending a chill through the camp. Emily zipped up her jacket and stepped out of her tent, clutching the tablet displaying the results. She found Jake sitting by the fire, poking at the embers with a stick. His face was illuminated by the orange glow, highlighting the lines of stress etched into his features. We need to talk, Emily said quietly. Sitting down beside him, Jake looked up, his expression wary. What is it? It's John, she replied, hesitating for a moment. I ran the tests on his blood and something's wrong. Maybe wrong isn't the right word. Something's different. Jake frowned. Different how? She took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. His blood shows signs of changes. Elevated enzyme levels, abnormal protein structures. It's like the venom triggered some kind of reaction in his body. I've never seen anything like it. Jake stared at her, his jaw tightening. Are you saying he's infected? Is this going to spread? No, I don't think so, Emily said quickly. At least not in the way you're thinking. Not a disease or virus. It's more like adaptation. His cells are changing, reacting to whatever was in that creature's saliva. But I can't tell yet whether it's harmful or beneficial. Jake let out a sharp laugh, though there was no humor in it. Great, so now we've got a ticking time bomb walking around camp. Fantastic. He's not a time bomb, Emily insisted, her voice firm. Whatever's happening to him, it's fascinating. This could be groundbreaking if we handle it carefully. Carefully. Jake snapped, his patience wearing thin. Emily, we're on an alien planet with no backup, no support, and no idea what we're dealing with. careful isn't enough. We need answers, and we need them fast. Before Emily could respond, John's voice cut through the tension. Hey, I'm still here, you know. He approached the fire, holding up his injured arm. And I feel fine. It's better than fine, actually. Both Jake and Emily turned to look at him. In the dim light, John seemed different. His posture was relaxed, confident, and there was a subtle energy radiating from him that hadn't been there before. Even his movements appeared smoother, more fluid. What do you mean, better than fine? Jake asked cautiously. John flexed his fingers, cracking his knuckles. I don't know how to explain it. I just feel stronger, faster, like I could run a marathon without breaking a sweat. Emily exchanged a glance with Jake, her earlier findings suddenly making a lot more sense. Do you feel sick at all? Dizzy? Nauseous? Nope, not even tired. If anything, I feel wide awake. Jake stood up abruptly, gripping his rifle tightly. This is bad, really bad. We don't know what that thing did to you, John. For all we know, you could turn into one of those beasts any second now. John rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed. Relax, Jake, I'm not turning into anything. If I were dangerous, don't you think I'd have done something already? That's exactly what worries me, Jake shot back. You're acting like nothing's wrong, but we both know that's not true. Something inside you has changed, and until we understand what's happening, I'm keeping an eye on you. Standoff lasted only a moment before Emily stepped between them, her hands raised in a placating gesture. Enough. Fighting isn't going to help anyone. You need to stay calm and focus on figuring this out. Jake sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. Fine, but I'm posting guards tonight, just in case. John smirked, but didn't argue further. Instead, he wandered off toward the edge of the camp, gazing into the dark jungle. The others watched him warily, unsure whether to trust his nonchalance or heed Jake's warnings. Later that night, as the camp settled into an uneasy quiet, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. She replayed the events of the day in her mind, searching for clues she might have overlooked. What had the creature intended when it attacked John? Is it truly aggressive, or had its actions been driven by something else entirely? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft rustling sound coming from the trees. She froze, her heart pounding as she scanned the darkness. For a brief moment, she thought she saw glowing green eyes watching her from the shadows. But when she blinked, they were gone. Shivering, she pulled her jacket tighter and reminded herself to stay focused. Whatever secrets this planet held, they were far from unraveling them. And John, whether he realized it or not, was at the center of it all. Unusual abilities the next morning brought a strange mix of unease and curiosity to the camp. The sun filtered weakly through the thick canopy, casting long shadows across the damp ground. Emily was already up, poring over her notes and running additional tests on John's blood. Jake had assigned Chris and Laura to keep watch, their rifles slung over their shoulders as they patrolled the perimeter. Meanwhile, John seemed unusually energetic, moving around the camp with a spring in his step that bordered on unnatural. Breakfast. It was a quiet affair, the kind where no one wanted to speak, but everyone had something weighing on their minds. Emily finally broke the silence, addressing the group while sipping from a steaming cup of instant coffee. I've been going over the data again, she began, choosing her words carefully. And there's no doubt about it, something inside. John is changing. Jake frowned, leaning forward. Changing how? Is he still human? Emily hesitated before responding. Yes, he's still human. But enhanced somehow. His strength, speed, reflexes, they're all improving at an alarming rate. I think the venom from the beast triggered something dormant in his body. John smirked, flexing his arm playfully. I told you, I feel great. Better than ever. Laura shifted uncomfortably, glancing at him sideways. But what does that mean for us? Are we safe around him? I'm not a threat, John said firmly, though his tone carried a hint of annoyance. If I were dangerous, don't you think? I'd have done something by now? No. That's not the point, Jake cut in sharply. We don't know what this enhancement will do in the long run. What if it gets worse? What if you lose control? Before John could respond, Emily stepped in, trying to diffuse the tension. We need more time to study this. So far, Everything points to positive change as increased physical capabilities. Faster healing, but we can't rule out potential side effects. Side effects like what? Chris asked nervously, gripping his rifle tighter. Turning into some kind of monster? No one's turning into anything, John snapped, standing abruptly. He grabbed a nearby metal Tula-heavy wrench used for repairs and squeezed it tightly in his hand. To everyone's shock, the solid steel bent under his grip as easily as if it were made of clay. John stared at it for a moment, then tossed it aside casually. See, still me, just stronger. The group fell silent, staring at the mangled wrench lying on the ground. Even Jake looked shaken, though he tried to hide it behind a stern expression. This isn't normal, he muttered, shaking his head. Nothing about this is normal. Emily nodded slowly, her mind racing. That's true. But we're scientists. We came here to explore and learn. This might be our chance to understand something extraordinary. Jake turned to her, his voice low and urgent. Or it might get us killed. We're dealing with forces we don't understand, Emily. If things go wrong, there's no backup plan. We'll be careful, she insisted, her tone firm. But we can't ignore what's happening. This could change everything we know about biology, evolution of inhuman potential. While the debate continued, John wandered off toward the edge of the camp, leaving the others to argue. He didn't feel threatened or angry. He felt alive. More alive than he ever had before. Every breath seemed sharper, every movement smoother. The jungle, once intimidating and foreign, now called to him in ways he couldn't explain. It wasn't just the physical changes. It was something deeper, almost instinct. As he stood there, gazing into the dense foliage, he noticed something strange. His senses were heightened, could hear distant sounds, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of insects that no one else seemed to pick up on. Colors appeared brighter, scents sharper, and then there was the lingering sensation in his mind, like a faint hum vibrating through his thoughts. It reminded him of the moment the beast had bitten him. Only now it felt familiar, almost comforting. Back at the camp, tensions continued to rise. Jake pulled Emily aside, speaking in hushed tones so the others wouldn't overhear. I don't like this, he admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. Every hour we stay here puts us at risk. We should pack up and head back to the ship. And leave John behind, Emily countered, her eyes narrowing. You know we can't do that. Besides, if we leave now, we'll never understand what's happening to him or why that creature attacked in the first place. We don't have the luxury of figuring everything out, Jake argued. Our mission was to gather samples and map the area, not play lab rats. If John becomes a liability, we'll have no choice but to neutralize the situation. Emily stiffened, her expression hardening. Neutralize? You mean hurt him? It's not an option? It might be the only one if things spiral out of control, Jake replied grimly. I won't let this mission end in disaster because we underestimated the risks. Their conversation was interrupted by a shout from Laura, who was stationed near the tree line. Something's moving out there. Everyone sprang into action, grabbing weapons and rushing toward her position. Through the thick vines and underbrush, they spotted a shadow darting between the trees. At first glance, it looked like the same beast that had attacked John, its glowing green eyes piercing through the gloom. But instead of charging at them, it paused, watching silently from a distance. Stay back, Jake ordered, raising his rifle. Don't provoke it. To everyone's surprise, John stepped forward, lowering Jake's aim with a firm hand. Wait, it's not attacking. How do you know? Jake demanded, his voice rising.
I nearly
took your arm off last time. No, John replied calmly, his gaze locked on the creature. There was no fear in his eyes, only curiosity. Slowly he raised his hands, palms open, signaling peace. The beast hesitated, tilting its massive head slightly as if studying him. Then, without warning, it turned and disappeared into the jungle, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. What the hell was that? Chris asked, lowering his weapon. Why didn't it attack? I don't think it wanted to, Emily said. Softly, her voice filled with wonder. Maybe it was testing us sore. Maybe it recognized John. Recognized him? Jake repeated incredulously. What are you talking about? Emily glanced at John, who still stood rooted to the spot, staring after the creature. Think about it. What? It created a connection. A bond. That thing isn't just some wild animal, it's intelligent. The idea hung in the air, unsettling yet undeniable. For a moment no one spoke, the weight of Emily's words sinking in. Finally, Jake broke the silence, his tone gruff but resigned. Fine, let's say you're right. What do we do now? We keep observing, Emily replied firmly. Both John and the creature. If we can figure out the nature of this bond, we might uncover something incredible. As the day wore on, John became increasingly restless. The pull of the jungle grew stronger, urging him to venture deeper into its heart. He tried to ignore it, focusing instead on helping the team with their tasks, but the sensation persisted. By late afternoon, he decided to take a walk alone, claiming he needed fresh air to clear his head. The others watched him go, exchanging worried glances. Should we follow him? Laura asked quietly. No, Emily said after a pause. Need space. If we push too hard, we'll only make things worse. But what if he runs into that thing again? Chris pressed. What if it attacks him or worse? We'll deal with that if it happens, Jake interjected, his tone final. For now, we stick together and stay alert. Meanwhile, John found himself drawn to a secluded clearing deep within the jungle. The air felt different here, charged with energy that buzzed against his skin. He knelt down, running his fingers over the moss-like vegetation glowing faintly. Beneath his touch, it pulsed gently, almost rhythmically, as if responding to his presence. Closing his eyes, he focused on the sensations coursing through him, the heightened awareness, the primal instincts, the inexplicable connection to the planet itself. And then, suddenly he heard it. A low growl, barely audible over the rustling leaves. Opening his eyes, he saw the beast emerge from the shadows, its massive form moving with surprising grace. This time, however, it didn't attack. Instead, it stopped a few feet away. Its glowing eyes fixed on him. John swallowed hard, his pulse quickening despite his calm demeanor. Hey there, he said softly, keeping his voice steady. Remember me? The beast tilted its head, studying him intently. Then, to his astonishment, it lowered itself to the ground, resting its scaled body on the soft earth. Its posture wasn't aggressive, it was almost submissive. Taking a cautious step forward, John extended his hand slowly, palm facing upward. The beast sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring, before nudging its snout gently against his fingers. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through him. Images flashing briefly in his mind, vivid scenes of the jungle, ancient rituals, and other creatures like this one, living alongside humans. When the vision faded, John stumbled backward, his breath coming in short gasps. The beast watched him silently, waiting. Somehow, he understood it wasn't hostile. It hadn't attacked him out of malice. It had marked him, chosen him for reasons he couldn't yet comprehend. Returning to camp later that evening, John struggled to put his experience into words. The others listened intently, their expressions ranging from awe to skepticism. So, what you're saying is, Emily began cautiously, you think it wants to communicate? John nodded, his expression serious. Yeah, and I think it knows I'm connected to it now, to this place. Division within the team the next morning brought a heavy cloud of tension to the camp. The group gathered around the fire pit, their faces drawn and tired from a restless night. John sat apart from the others, his arms crossed as he stared into the flames. His encounter with the beast weighed heavily on his mind. But he kept silent, unsure of how much more he could or should share. The others, however, were far from quiet. Jake was the first to speak, his voice sharp and clipped.
We need to talk about what happened last night.
About John? Emily looked up from her notes, her expression guarded. What exactly do you want to discuss? What do I want to discuss? Jake repeated, his tone rising slightly. About the fact that our teammate is apparently having psychic conversations with an alien monster? Does that sound normal to you? It's not psychic, John interjected, his patience wearing thin. I told you it's like the thing is sharing memories or emotions. It's not attacking me, it's trying to communicate. Communicate? Laura chimed in nervously, clutching her mug tightly.
Right.
With what? Fangs and claws? That thing nearly tore your arm off, John. Why are we pretending it's harmless now? I'm not pretending anything, John shot back, his frustration growing. It chose me for a reason. Maybe it wants help. Maybe it needs something from us. Or maybe it's using you, Jake countered sharply. Ever think of that? What if this whole bond you're feeling is just a trick? A way to get close to us so it can strike when we least expect it? The accusation hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. Emily glanced between Jake and John, sensing the conversation spiraling out of control. Let's not jump to conclusions, she said calmly, though her hands trembled slightly. We don't have enough information yet. We need to stay objective. Objective? Chris asked incredulously, shaking his head. You call this objective? John's acting like some kind of superhero, and that beast is lurking out there watching us. How is any of this normal? It's not normal, Emily admitted, her voice firm despite the unease in her chest. That doesn't mean it's dangerous. Whatever's happening to Janand, whatever that creature wants, it's beyond anything we've seen before. If we panic and act rashly, we could make things worse. Jake let out a harsh laugh, running a hand through his hair. Worse? You think sitting here waiting for disaster is better? Emily, we're dealing with forces we don't understand. Every second we stay here puts us at risk. And every second we waste arguing gets us nowhere, Emily replied, her tone hardening. If we leave now, we'll never know why this is happening. Isn't that worth investigating? No, Jake said flatly, his eyes narrowing. Our mission was clear. Gather samples, map the terrain, and get out safely. This, whatever it is, wasn't part of the plan. And I won't let curiosity turn into carelessness. John stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the ground. So what are you suggesting? That we abandon this place and me because you're scared? I'm not scared, Jake snapped, stepping closer. I'm being realistic. If you lose control, if that thing inside you takes over, we won't stand a chance. The words hit like a punch, silencing the group momentarily. John's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. For a moment, it seemed like he might lash out, but instead, he forced himself to take a deep breath. I'm still me, Jake. I haven't hurt anyone, and I don't plan to. That's not the point, Jake insisted, his voice low and intense. You're changing, whether you realize it or not. And until we know what those changes mean, you're a liability. A liability? John repeated bitterly, shaking his head. You don't trust me. It's not about trust, Jake shot back. It's about survival. The argument escalated quickly, voices rising as tempers flared. Emily tried to intervene, her pleas for calm drowned out by the heated exchange. Laura and Chris exchanged worried glances, torn between siding with Jake's caution or Emily's curiosity. The division within the group was palpable, crack widening with each passing moment. Finally, Jake turned away, his decision made. That's it. We're done debating. Starting today, John stays confined to the medical tent until we figure out what's going on. No exceptions. What? John exclaimed, his voice sharp with disbelief. You can't lock me up like some kind of prisoner. Yes, I can, Jake replied coldly, and I will. If you refuse, I'll sedate you myself. John took a step forward, his posture tense, but Emily stepped between them, her hands raised in a placating gesture. Stop it, both of you. Fighting isn't going to solve anything. She's right, Laura added hesitantly, her voice trembling. We need to stick together. But maybe Jake has a point. Just for now, until we know more. John stared at her, betrayal flashing in his eyes. Even Emily, who had always supported him, seemed hesitant to fully oppose Jake's decision. He felt cornered, isolated, as though the very people he trusted most were turning against him. Fine, said finally, his voice low and bitter. Do what you want. But don't come crying to me when things go wrong. Without another word, he walked toward the medical tent, disappearing inside. The others watched him go, the weight of the situation settling over them like a suffocating blanket. For a long moment, no one spoke. This isn't right, Emily murmured, breaking the silence. Locking him up isn't the answer. Then what is? Jake demanded, his tone weary but resolute. Tell me, Emily, because I don't see any other options. She didn't respond, her mind racing with doubts and fears. Deep down, she knew Jake's concerns weren't unfounded. John's abilities were growing stronger by the day, and the connection he shared with the beast was unpredictable. But confining him felt wrong, not just morally, but practically. If the creature returned, and it likely would, how would they handle it without John? As the hours passed, the atmosphere in the camp grew increasingly tense. John remained in the medical tent, refusing to speak or acknowledge the others. Outside, Jake assigned shifts to monitor him, ensuring someone kept watch at all times. Emily volunteered for the first shift, hoping to mend the rift between them. When she entered the tent, she found John sitting on the cot, staring at the wall with an unreadable expression. "Hey," she said softly, closing the flap behind her. "Are you holding up?" He didn't look at her, his voice flat. How do you think?" "I'm sorry," she said sincerely, sitting down beside him. "I wanted to fight harder for you, but—" Jake's scared. "We all are. Scared of me," John asked bitterly, finally meeting her gaze. "Is that what this is really about? You think I'm some kind of monster now?"
Ellie?
"No," Emily replied firmly, reaching out to touch his shoulder. "You're still John. But you're changing, and none of us knows what that means. What even you? We're just trying to protect everyone, including you." John sighed, his anger fading into exhaustion. "I know, I get it. But locking me up isn't going to fix anything. If that thing comes back and it will lie, need to be ready." "Ready for what?" Emily pressed gently. "What do you think it wants?" John hesitated, his thoughts swirling. "I don't know. Not completely, but I feel connected to it. Like it's part of me now. Whatever it's trying to show me, it's important. I think it's tied to this planet, to why we're here." Emily studied him closely, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he was still in control. But the uncertainty gnawed at her. Whispering warnings she couldn't ignore, before she could respond, a shout came from outside the tent. "Something's moving near the edge of the jungle." Both John and Emily sprang to their feet, rushing out to join the others. The team gathered at the perimeter, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Through the trees, glowing green eyes appeared, watching silently. The beast had returned. Jake raised his rifle immediately, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Stay back," he ordered, his voice sharp. "No," John shouted, stepping forward despite Jake's warning. "Don't shoot. It's not attacking." "Get back, John," Jake snapped, his tone leaving no room for argument. "This is exactly why we can't trust you." But John ignored him, his focus entirely on the creature. Slowly, deliberately, he approached it, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. The beast tilted its head, studying him intently before letting out a low growl that vibrated through the air. The others watched in stunned silence, unsure of what to do. Emily's heart raced as she realized the truth. John wasn't afraid of the beast because he no longer saw it as a threat. To him, it was more than just an animal. It was a link to something greater, something ancient and profound. As the moments stretched on, the beast lowered itself to the ground, its massive form resting calmly. John knelt beside it, placing a hand on its scaled hide. A surge of energy passed between them, visible only in the faint glow emanating from the moss beneath their feet. When John finally stood and turned back to the group, his expression was resolute. "It's not our enemy," he said firmly. "It's our guide." Jake lowered his rifle slowly, his face pale with disbelief. "Guide to what?" "To understanding this place," John replied, his voice steady. "To finding out why we're really here?" The others exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of his words sinking in. Whatever lay ahead, they knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The bond deepens. The days that followed were a blur of tension and uncertainty. John's encounter with the beast had left an indelible mark on the group, dividing them further. Jake remained steadfast in his belief that caution was their only option, while Emily struggled to reconcile her scientific curiosity with her growing unease. Laura and Chris stayed quiet most of the time, glancing nervously between John and Jake whenever the topic arose. But for John, the bond he shared with the creature continued to grow stronger. Pulling him deeper into its world, Jake's decision to confine John to the medical tent lasted only a day before it became clear that it wasn't practical or fair. The team needed John's strength and skills to manage daily tasks, and keeping him isolated only fueled resentment. Reluctantly, Jake agreed to let John move freely under strict supervision, though he made it clear that any sign of trouble would result in immediate action. For now, the uneasy truce held. Despite the lingering mistrust, John found himself drawn back to the jungle more often than ever. Each visit brought new revelations, new sensations that defied explanation. The glowing vegetation seemed to respond to his presence, pulsing brighter as he walked past. The air felt alive, buzzing against his skin like static electricity. And always, there was the faint hum in his mind, the connection to the beast that had become as natural as breathing. One afternoon, while the others worked on repairing equipment damaged by the humid climate, John slipped away unnoticed. He didn't go far, just beyond the edge of the camp where the trees formed a dense wall of greenery. There, he closed his eyes and focused, letting the hum guide him. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but as he concentrated, it grew louder, clearer. The jungle whispered secrets to him, urging him forward. He followed the sensation, instinctively, weaving through thick vines and over roots until he reached the familiar clearing. The moss beneath his feet pulsed rhythmically, glowing faintly in the dim light filtering through the canopy above. There, waiting for him, was the beast. It stood tall and still, its massive form casting a shadow across the ground. Its green eyes locked onto John, radiating intelligence far beyond anything he'd encountered before. This time there was no hesitation. The creature stepped closer, lowering its head slightly, as if inviting contact. John reached out slowly, placing his hand on the cool scales of its snout. The connection surged instantly, flooding his mind with images and emotions so vivid they took his breath away. He saw flashes of ancient rituals, humans and creatures like this one, standing side by side, working together to protect their shared home. He felt waves of loyalty, trust, and even sorrow as memories of battles fought and lives lost unfolded before him. But there was something else too, a sense of urgency. The visions shifted, showing scenes of destruction, fires raging through the jungle, skies darkened by smoke and the cries of dying creatures echoing through the chaos. In the center of it all stood humans, not explorers like his team, but invaders wielding weapons and machines. They tore through the land without mercy, leaving devastation in their wake. When the vision faded, John stumbled backward, clutching his head as the emotions overwhelmed him. The beast watched silently, its expression unreadable, yet somehow compassionate. Slowly, it nudged its snout against his shoulder, offering comfort in its own way. "What is this?" John whispered, his voice trembling. "What are you trying to tell me?" The answer came not in words, but in feelings, a deep, unshakable certainty that the fate of this planet and, perhaps humanity itself, was tied to the choices they would make. The beast wasn't just a guide, it was a guardian, tasked with protecting its world from those who sought to exploit it. And now, somehow, John had been chosen to help. Back at the camp, the others noticed his absence once again. Emily scanned the tree line anxiously, her stomach tightening with worry. "Where is he?" she asked aloud, her voice barely audible. "Over the crackling fire? He's probably off communing with his new best friend." Jake muttered sarcastically, though his tone carried an edge of concern. "We can't keep letting him wander alone, Emily. Every time he goes out there, he comes back different." "I know," Emily replied quietly, her gaze fixed on the jungle. "But we can't stop him either, not without understanding why. This is happening." Before Jake could respond, John reappeared, stepping into the clearing with a look of determination etched onto his face. His clothes were damp from the humidity, and his boots were caked with mud, but his eyes burned with purpose. "Where have you been?" Jake demanded, rising to his feet. "Can't just disappear whenever you feel like it." "I've been learning," John said simply, ignoring the accusation in Jake's voice. "That thing out there, it's not our enemy. It's trying to warn us." "Warn us about what?" Laura asked nervously, hugging her arms around herself. About what happens when outsiders come here. John explained, his tone urgent. This planet has seen visitors before. Humans. They came looking for resources for power. When they didn't find what they wanted, they destroyed everything in their path. Emily frowned, leaning forward slightly. Are you saying this? Place has been visited by Earth before. By humans. John shook his head. Maybe, or maybe by someone else. It doesn't matter. What matters is that history repeats itself. If we don't change course, if we treat this planet like it's ours to take, we'll end up making the same mistakes. Jake crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. And how do you know all this? Did the beast tell you? Or did it just show you another pretty slideshow? Showed me enough, John shot back, his patience wearing thin. Saw it, Jake. I felt it. Fires burning, animals screaming, the land dying. Is that really so hard to believe after everything we've seen here? For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of John's words hung heavy in the air, forcing each of them to confront uncomfortable truths. Emily broke the silence first, her voice soft but firm. If John's right, and I think he might be, then we need to rethink our priorities. We came here to explore, sure, but exploration doesn't mean exploitation. Maybe our job isn't to map this place or gather samples. Maybe it's to listen to learn. Jake sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. Even if I believed half of what you're saying, which I don't, we still have orders. A mission. Do you honestly think Command will care about some glowing moss and a giant lizard? The lizard saved my life, John interjected sharply. And it's teaching me things I never thought possible. Can call it whatever you want, but it's intelligent. Smarter than any of us realized. Laura hesitated, glancing at Chris before speaking. So, what do we do? Just pack up and leave? Pretend none of this happened? No, Emily said firmly, her resolve strengthening. We stay. But we approach this differently, carefully, respectfully. If we can prove that this planet is worth protecting, if we can document its value without harming it, then maybe we can change things. Maybe we can make people understand. Jake stared at her, his jaw tightening. You're talking about risking our careers? Our lives? For what? A theory? For hope, Emily replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Isn't that why we came here in the first place? To discover something extraordinary? Well, we found it. Now we have a choice. Destroy it or protect it. The argument stretched on late into the night, voices rising and falling as tempers flared. But eventually exhaustion won out and the group retreated to their tents. Each wrestling with their own thoughts, John stayed awake longer than the others, sitting by the edge of the camp and staring into the darkness. He could feel the beast nearby, watching silently from the shadows. Its presence was comforting, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. The bond he shared with the creature wasn't just a gift, it was a responsibility. As dawn broke over the jungle, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, John rose to his feet. The others were beginning to stir, emerging from their tents with groggy expressions. When they saw him standing there, his posture resolute, they knew the discussion wasn't over. The journey they had embarked on had taken a turn none of them could have predicted. The decisions they made next would shape not only their lives, but the future of the planet and perhaps humanity itself.